Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our ST115 Unit 5 discussion. Today we're going to be talking about basically you, all right, the surgical technologist and what your role will be once you start down this career path. We're going to talk about things like surgical conscience, describing what you can and cannot do in your role as a surgical technologist, surgical conscience, and how all of those apply to you. Okay, so here are your assignments for this week. You do have a couple more bigger assignments than normal. Last week was kind of light. So this 90 point one here, if you don't turn that in, does drop your grade quite a bit. So just be aware of that and try to keep up with those as best as you can. If you can't, just reach out to me and we can work something out, okay? Don't forget your discussion posts, first due on Wednesday, and then the remaining two to your peers are due on Sunday, right? So as a surge tech, how do I know what I can do, right? How do you know what your role in the operating room as part of the OR team truly is? Because you have to make sure that you are functioning in your scope of practice. You'll hear that term a lot, scope of practice, because surge techs are governed by laws. So we have federal laws, state laws, even different hospital policies that say what you can and cannot do. So there are different ways to look those up, and I'm going to show some of those sites to you, some of those websites. That way you can go and look up your state and say, okay, I live in Ohio, what can I do? Right? Maybe different than what somebody in Washington can do or California. So it is always up to you as the surge tech to be responsible enough to go make sure you can look those things up, because what you don't want to do is rely on hearsay. So maybe your best friend works there too, right? They, if something goes wrong, you're held liable, not that person that told you. So keep that in mind, okay? So laws that govern surge techs, the two here are federal and state laws. And federal is going to be anything across the state, across the board. It's going to be the same no matter where you go in the United States. Some state laws may dictate your scope of practice, which it says are meant to protect and benefit the public. So the state may say, no, you cannot prep the patient, or um, no, you cannot put in lidocaine jelly. That might be considered a medication administration, but in West Virginia, it's okay. You can do that. It's different things. But typically across the board, you can't generically, we'll say, alter tissue. You can't be making incisions. You don't suture. We can in most places, and that might be a state law depending, can staple skin depending on where you are. In my area, Ohio, West Virginia, we are allowed to staple skin under the supervision of the surgeon, because sometimes the surgeon wants to hold the adds and forceps to close the incision while we do the stapling. So, or vice versa, we can hold the adsense while they staple. Okay, so you can always search those things. I'm going to show you exactly where you can search for these things. So AST has a good website. I actually have it pulled up if I can share my other screen. But you could even just type this in too if you wanted. You could pause it and write it down, whatever you need to do. Or you could just go to ast.org. So let me find this other page I have pulled up. Window. I have like 500 windows open. Here. Sorry about that. There. Okay, so we have here's the MBSUs. We right here first. Job descriptions. So AST state law map. You're just gonna come here and click on your state. Let's say West Virginia, because that's where I'm from, right in this general vicinity. So you click on that, scroll down, and it kind of gives you a good general description as to your role as a surge tech, and then you could click on this. It gives you a little bit more detail on your job description. So education, it gives you just a good definition of what you are, what your role is. Surge techs are allied health professions who are an integral part of the team, work under the supervision and delegatory authority of the surgeon. Experts in theory, which means you've gone through the appropriate training. Credentials, saying you've set for your exam, which is administered by the NBSTSA. Okay, so let's jump back. I have obviously a couple more websites to show you. First, let's talk about who is who. Who's who? We could play and guess who here. The surgeon is basically the captain of the ship. Sometimes you hear that term. Anesthesia or CRNA is going to be in the room. And then the circulating nurse, your first assistant, and then us as the surge tech. So all of us are working together, and you kind of learn what everybody's role is in the operating room and who can do what. Because as a surge tech, we are obviously not qualified to function as a CRNA, right? Or the surgeon, even though we learn surgeries, right? We learn what the surgeon needs to anticipate, but that doesn't mean we can actually do the surgery. Okay, so where did we come from as surge tech? So it really started back in the 1800s as a surgical nurse. And then really in World War II is when the role truly developed as a surge tech because more surgeries were happening because of the war. They started really as surgical nurses, but are also Army corpsmen, functioned as ORTs or OR technicians. So the military did play a big role in the development of our professions as well as nursing. So kind of branched from there and became more specialized, I guess would be the word, because surgery is developed, right? Research has developed, techniques have developed. So with all of that comes the need for a specialized role. So they didn't start licensing, or not licensing, I'm sorry, certifying until about 1970 it used to be called LCC-ST, which transformed essentially into AST, or the Certified Surgical Technologist. So we could also specify roles in the OR based on sterile versus non-sterile. So it's important to understand who functions in the sterile role versus non-sterile. Okay. Typically, the surge techs are in the sterile role. We can have some non-sterile functions. Like we might be needed to pull cases for the item or set the room up, or maybe in your facility you reprocess and sterilize items. That's very probable. But typically we function here in the sterile role. Circulators may have some small function in the sterile role, but typically they are the non-sterile role, right? And CRNAs, anesthesiology, are non-sterile. Then you've got your miscellaneous people that maybe come and go in the room, but aren't like always a part of the team. So they may be precepting, somebody may come in from X-ray, or someone that has to communicate with somebody else in regards to patient care. So there's other roles. Sometimes you have to do a lot of things. So I talked about the job description. I actually already clicked on that link for you, so you can go back and read that again. But part of being a surgical technologist a big part of it is continuing your education. We have to keep up with this specialty because things do change pretty often, right? So this is your certifying body, I guess you could say. The NBSTSA, or the National Board of Surgical Technology and Surgical Assisting. This is the company in which you will take your certification exam through. And if you pass, which you will, right, you will become a CST, a Certified Surgical Technologist. They also certify surgical first assistants. So I also had that website pulled up. I jump back to it. Okay, so that was your roles here. So you can go to this website as well. Like once you get close to taking your exam, you're going to want to know basically what's on the exam, what to study for, right? Yes. So if you go here, it tells you a little bit about the exam prep. You can get a certification study guide from them, which is good. It's got a lot of practice questions and multiple choice, which is what you'll see on this exam. It tells you on this webpage the exam content outline. So things that you're going to expect. There are 175 questions, 150 are scored, 25 are thrown out, but you do not know what 25 are thrown out. So your score is 102 out of 170, or technically out of 150, is passing. Anything below 102 is failing, and you'd have to retake it. Okay, so let's look at this exam content outline. So if you think you're weak in any of these areas like sterile processing or operative procedures, you're going to want to spend some time reviewing that kind of thing. So they have, if they listed this here, there will be a question on these items. I can guarantee you. Okay, that's how they make their test. So you get 12 questions out of 175 are post-op procedures, only 12. But it is important, even though we don't go to PACU, there are some things that happen after we've closed the patient up that are important. Even ancillary duties. Whose role? Like what we just talked about today. That's part of that. Sterilization 17. Anatomy alone is 20 items out of 175. So it's very important to know your anatomy as a surge tech. So they give you a few sample questions here, but I just wanted to point that out to you because you need to know your resources. It's only going to help you become a better surge tech, right? So I would explore, if I were you, the AST.org website, as well as the NBSTSA.org website, and prepare yourself for the role that you're about to take. Okay. And if you have any questions on any of those, please feel free to reach out to me. I've put a lot of students through certification exams and graduations and stuff. So reach out if you have any questions when you get to that point, even if we're past this class, it's perfectly fine to email me if you have questions about reviewing for your test or whatever. That's not a problem. So yeah, reach out to me anytime. All right. Have a good night.